All right, welcome everybody, and right away, this is what we're talking about today. Another profile of Brandon Sanderson. Now, partly we're doing this because it's easy fodder for a live stream, but also partly because the one we talked about last week was so egregious that now I'm like kind of on pins and needles waiting to see how this one goes. I have not read this yet. It came out yesterday on March 29th. Today's the 30th. It came out yesterday, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to save it. And I want to react to it live. So hopefully it goes better than last week's. And I know for sure we're not going to get through this whole thing because it is quite lengthy. I don't know. I guess it's possible, but it feels unlikely that we'll get through this whole thing. But this is an article in Esquire, and I guess I'm curious about this partly just because it's this is how do I put this? Brandon Sanderson is us in a lot of ways, right? He doesn't have the same personality as everybody or the same beliefs or whatever, but if you ever meet Brandon, one thing you'll know right away is that he is a nerd just like us. Loves playing Magic, loves video games. Uh, he, well, there's a lot of cliches that you could say about nerds that Brandon fits really well into. And so with last week's article in Wired, I felt like it was an attack on us as fans. And so why do I want to read another one in a live stream? Well, it's because I want to see how they treat, yes, Brandon, but also us as fans. Are they going to look down their noses? Are they going to sneer at Brandon and his fans the way that the Wired article did? Only one way to find out. So we can start right here with the hero image. This is an odd graphic design choice, but okay. It's like they cut him out and then just separated him a little bit from the background. It's very odd. Okay. Let's see. The genre, or welcome to Brandon Sanderson's Fantasy Empire. The genre's most popular writer is determined to upend how books get made. We visited his mind-blowing headquarters in suburban Utah, and mind-blowing is correct, yes, where he and dozens of employees are working to restore power to the reader. All right, what would do we hold up a book I don't know how to whatever. It's but an interesting phrase, working to restore power to the reader. And we'll see where they go with that. This is my dream, Brandon Sanderson says. We're 30 feet below the surface of northern Utah in a room that feels like a cross between a 5-star hotel lobby and a Bond villain's secret base. My ears popped on the way down. Yeah, that's possible, I suppose. That could just be the general elevation. Sanderson points to the grand piano, the shelves filled with ammonite fossils, the high walls covered in wood and damask paneling, and his pièce de résistance, cylindrical aquarium swirling with saltwater fish, which is very cool, by the way. George Martin bought an old movie theater. Jim Butcher bought a LARPing castle. I built an underground supervillain lair. There you go. This is where Sanderson writes best-selling fantasy and science fiction novels. Many of them take place in an interconnected series of worlds called the Cosmere, his ink and paper equivalent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But instead of superheroes defending Earth, Sanderson's warriors, thieves, and scholars and royals are spread across a richly detailed system of planets. Sorry, man, my reading skills are suffering today. From the ash-covered cities of Scadrial to the shattered plains of Roshar, a landscape directly inspired by the sandstone buttes and slot canyons of southeastern Utah. It all started 25 years ago when Sanderson, a practicing Mormon, was an undergraduate student at Brigham Young University, just 15 miles away in Provo. Okay, so here we have our first major difference. I will say that this is less colorful, but it's also more respectful than the Wired article, right? So he's a practicing Mormon, not a weirdo Mormon in this particular piece. It's so far 3 paragraphs in, it's giving me less to be upset about. which is good because I was upset about a lot with the last one. He took a part-time job working night shifts at the front desk of a nearby hotel where he could write between midnight and 5 a.m. Over the next 5 years, while working at the hotel during and after his undergraduate years at BYU, he wrote 12 full-length novels that were all rejected by publishers. But one day in 2003, Mashi Fetter, an editor at the Tor Book subsidiary of the publishing house Macmillan, discovered one of his manuscripts in the slush pile, and the fate of the Cosmere was sealed. So, I will say, this is it's in an article format. This is a bit like an article doing what you caution novelists not to do, which is like front load with world building and too much character detail or whatever. This is a tough paragraph. You have to, I don't know. I feel like you kind of have to care to get through a paragraph like that. That was a lot. First came Elantris, Sanderson's 2005 debut about a dead city of immortals once worshipped as gods. Next was the Mistborn franchise. That's interesting to call it a franchise, where magic-wielding thieves take down a dystopian empire. Then, in 2009, the wife of fantasy legend Robert Jordan picked Sanderson to finish writing the Wheel of Time series after her husband's death from a rare blood disease. And finally, that's an odd detail. It's interesting and it's true, but it's like there's a lot of just little details that are stacking up as we go. Finally, we've arrived at Sanderson's magnum opus in progress, the dense and wondrous Stormlight Archive, a sprawling 10-volume war epic that reads like the Iliad from another solar system. The fourth and most recent Stormlight book, Rhythm of War, was published in November 2020, with a fifth entry scheduled for November 2024. Now 47 years old. I forget that. He is... I think the first time I met him, he was like 39. So he's still 39 in my head. Now 47 years old, Sanderson has already published 21 Cosmere books, and he plans on publishing at least 19 more. At least 19. Yeah, I'd say at least. But I do have to finish all this by the time I'm 70, he says. I get the feeling he doesn't want to wind up like a certain someone in New Mexico who's already 74. Wow. Still, even now, Sanderson is easily one of the most successful and prolific fantasy writers of the century so far. Here's, let's see, this is a picture of the lair. Oh, yeah. Stained glass windows depicting scenes from the Cosmere, the Wheel of Time, and some of Sanderson's favorite books. So, yeah, you go up those steps, and there's a game room up there. That's where they have a giant table for Magic the Gathering. And it is a cool table. They've got compartments for cards and dice, and it's really quite something. And these are legit stained glass, and they put like LED lights behind them to shine through. They are quite glorious to behold. As John Hammond might say, spared no expense. Okay. As we ascend a marble tunnel connecting his underground lair to his home, Sanderson narrates a series of stained glass windows designed by the Chinese-Australian artist John Guo, each depicting scenes from the Cosmere, the Wheel of Time, and some of his favorite books. We needed this tunnel because the driveway above it has to support a fire truck for code, so I figured it would be a perfect art gallery, he says, about as nonchalantly as my dad might talk about getting a new refrigerator from Home Depot. See, this is interesting. Like, okay, now we're getting into some enjoyable writing. I think up to now it's been a lot of like kind of ponderous paragraphs and ponderous details, but now we're getting into some fun stuff. Sanderson has been extremely popular among fantasy readers for more than a decade, but last year he made international headlines for raising $41 million on Kickstarters, doubling the previous fundraising record, to self-publish 4 secret books and deliver them directly to 185,000 fans. No publisher, no Amazon, no bookstores. I think some of the things traditional publishing companies do in New York are wrong-headed, he said. Somebody has to step up and say, here's another way. Sanderson's wearing his trademark outfit, black loafers, dark jeans, a patterned blazer, and a custom graphic t-shirt made by his team. He says they all come down here to watch movies in the attached 28-seat theater with the sound system so powerful I could feel it in my sternum. So that is absolutely true. The first thing I watched there, I'm trying to remember if it was either The Wheel of Time or Dune. I think it was Dune that came out first. And we all went to the lair and watched Dune. And you remember the scene, I'm not whatever. If you haven't seen it, go see it. They're dropping bombs, kind of partway through the movie, and I thought that they had installed vibrating seats. No, it's just that's how intense the bass is. It's incredible. It shakes your very soul. So it's pretty incredible. By the way, hello everybody. Alex, Wordless, that's Allison and Baba. Hey, nice to see you, Baba. The Lair is the way to watch Dune. It really was. It was cooler to watch Dune there than it would have been in like a regular movie theater. It was awesome. It was awesome. Okay, I tried for years to get New York publishers to do things differently, and they just weren't willing to. So I'm doing it my way, and if it works, I'll show them it works, he says, and if it doesn't, I'll fall on my face. There's Brandon and Emily, his wife. Oh, yeah, there you go. All right. If he's going to change the way books are published in the United States, Sanderson knows he can't do it alone. George R.R. Martin has 2 assistants, and so did Robert Jordan. That's normal for writers at the top of their field, he says. Then he turns to his wife, Emily, COO of the company they formed shortly after getting married in 2007, and smiles. We have 64 people, it's incredible. From the backseat of a Tesla Model 3, I can see individual fir trees on the Wasatch Mountains, a white palisade of late winter ice and snow that blocks out the eastern sky. We're driving down State Street in American Fork, Utah, a leafy suburb some 30 miles south of Salt Lake City. Okay, so first of all, this is interesting. From this, we gather, let's see, late winter ice. So this was probably written, I don't know, last month maybe? Something like that, February, early March potentially, or the visit was made then, and so I'm only bringing that up because the Wired piece that we all hate so much took the guy 5 months to write it. He came out for Dragonsteel in November and then couldn't figure out how to write his story. He had plenty of amazing material, but couldn't figure out an angle apparently. Whereas this writer was working a little more quickly. We passed through a dense grid of grassy lawns, mid-century ranches, and Mormon temples. Scenes for... Oh, yeah, and by the way, that is a thing. For a second, I was like, no, those are probably just chapels. But if you ever... Like Sunday meeting houses. But if you ever come to Utah, if you've ever seen a Mormon temple... they're usually lit up really bright. They're usually in white or close to it. And in Utah, there are obviously lots and lots of Mormons. And so you do have those like really bright white temples just dotting, especially in the Salt Lake Valley, but for several counties. They're just everywhere, all over the place. Scenes from Footloose and The Sandlot were filmed here, along with last year's Under the Banner of Heaven, Hulu's true crime documentary, blah, blah, blah. It's also where Sanderson and their company have remained headquartered since buying property in a gated community 15 years ago. Some of us are literally family, says Becky Wilson from the passenger seat. She's Sanderson's executive coordinator as well as his sister-in-law. And other employees are friends from a long time ago. I didn't know anyone until I got here, says the driver, Octavia Escamilla Spiker, the company's social media and publicity coordinator. I'm just a member of the Harry Potter generation, and I love fantasy. Like many people on the team, she's a graduate of BYU, where Sanderson still finds time to teach creative writing as an adjunct professor. After passing auto repair shops and a tractor dealership, I spot a sign by the side of the road with a familiar logo for Dragonsteel Entertainment, the fast-growing LLC the Sandersons named after a precious metal in the Cosmere. We pull into the parking lot where Wilson and Spiker escort me into a tall building between a bike shop and a beauty salon. Oh, here's the saltwater aquarium. Pretty great. Okay, so let's see. What am I missing from you guys? Oh, good. Linnea is here. All right. Sorry. Well, now we can start. All right. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's keep moving then. This is the warehouse, Wilson says. Inside, there's a front office filled with crocheted creatures from Sanderson's books alongside gifts from fans. Some of his communications and events staff work here year-round. During my March visit, they are already planning the 2023 Dragonsteel Convention at the Salt Palace Convention Center in downtown Salt Lake City. A 2-day series of fan events on November 21st and 22nd, blah, blah, blah. Culminates in the midnight release of Defiant. Capping at 6,000 people. She expects the 2024 event will have a higher capacity as it will coincide with the release of the next Stormlight Archive novel. Yeah, I'll say. In the back of the warehouse, a cluster of cubicles for the fulfillment team gives way to an open space the size of a small airplane hangar, where thousands of books and subscription boxes are stacked 2 stories high in 15 storage bays. We've reached the beating heart of Dragonsteel Books, the publishing and merchandising divisions of Sanderson's business empire. To fulfill the Kickstarter, we had to double our staff, Sanderson says. Most of my traditionally published books are sold through Amazon, and I have huge problems with Amazon. They don't treat their employees very well. But if we do it ourselves, we know that people will be treated well, and that helps me sleep at night. All the swag and apparel in Dragonsteel's online store gets packed and shipped here, plus exclusive leather-bound editions of Sanderson's previous books and the 4 new Kickstarter titles and rewards. We made a long assembly line here on the kitting floor, and we have empty subscription boxes on one end, all the merchandise in the middle, and finished pallets at the other end, says Allie Reap, a fulfillment assistant who joined the team last year to help manage the Kickstarter rewards. 8 themed swag boxes with exclusive Cosmere and Cytoverse merchandise. Right now, okay, so hang on. We're getting back into just, this isn't like as colorful or punchy as the other one, but I feel like if you've never been to these places and you've never met Brandon and you don't know anything about this stuff, you're getting a really nice, thorough tour. And so while it's not as punchy as the other one, it's more informative, and if you're willing to actually think about what you're reading, it's more interesting. So let's see. I think, we'll come back here. And the other thing is, if we go back up to the very top, the title, Welcome to Brandon Sanderson's Fantasy Empire. And then we get our subheader here, and this is, it's actually telling us what the purpose of the article is, so far at least. Whereas the other one promised to tell us something about kind of how Brandon's Mormonism informs his books. And it touches on that, but doesn't, it kind of skips across the surface of that stuff and really is more about the author of the article than it is about the subject at hand. In this case, this author is not falling into that trap. So I think you could, if you prefer cutting writing, then the other one is more like fun and interesting. But this one is actually more informative. So, okay. Let's see, where are we? You know what? Before I keep going, I'm just going to check in on you guys. Punchy, don't you mean mean-spirited? Well, what I mean is, I do mean punchy, and yes, it was mean-spirited. Punchy, you don't have to be mean-spirited to be punchy, but that was the way that author chose to do it. And obviously we didn't care for it, but isn't it cool when a title and subtitle are actually indicative of the content and thesis of an article? I guess, whatever. Okay, right now, Dragonsteel's warehouse clerks are packing March's swag box for more than 38,000 backers, including t-shirts, mousepads, stickers, and collectible pins. Soon they'll be shipping Sanderson's second secret book, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, which you guys are going to have a lot of fun with. The first secret book, Tress of the Emerald Sea, a fairy tale romance set in the Cosmere and inspired by The Princess Bride, already started shipping to backers earlier this year as a premium hardcover detailed in green leather and gold foil. I think mine's on the shelf already, so it's too far away. Blah, blah, blah. Like the maps that have accompanied Sanderson's novels for decades, this edition was designed in-house at Dragonsteel by Isaac Stewart. On April 4th, Tor Books is releasing a more traditional but still gorgeous hardcover with a paper dust jacket available in bookstores and online. My New York publishers do good work, but you get an art director who has to put out 350 books a year, and their profit margins are too tight to make books like this, Sanderson says, pointing to his team's luxurious version of Tress. One thing I think publishing is poorly equipped to deal with right now is letting people pick their price point. Interesting. Okay. So again, I feel like we need to just leave this comment up because isn't it cool when the title and subtitle are actually indicative? Yes, it is. And it's he's not giving away the farm. He's not trying to, lead with his ending, right? But he's building up. He's laying bricks in the wall that he's building, and I can appreciate that. So let's see. For years, he tried convincing the former president of Macmillan, John Sargent, to publish multiple editions at different price points, including leather-bound hardcovers filled with original art, like Tress and the Emerald Sea, and bundle them with ebooks and merchandise. But Sargent never budged. Instead, publishers like Macmillan sell hardcovers and ebooks as two separate products, plus paperbacks that hit the market months later if the titles sell well enough. Sanderson says this punishes readers who choose to spend money to support the authors they love, even though they could pirate digital books or check out free hardcover copies from a library. Yeah, this is actually something I do. Can we get rid of that? Yeah, let's get rid of that. I end up spending a lot of money on books, and I mean like a kind of a ridiculous amount of money, because I do, if it's a book that I love, or if it's a book that we cover on the podcast, I try to get a hardcover if I can. Paperback is okay as well, but I always get a physical copy of any book that we cover, or any book that I know I want to reread in the future or give to my kids or whatever. But that's not always the best way to read when you're on the go, so I'll often get the Kindle edition, and then you get the Audible version on top of that, and pretty soon you've spent, $45-$50 for a book. I usually try not to go that high, find a deal or something, but yeah, I think this is right. Sanderson says this punishes readers, and yeah, that is accurate. I spend way too much money on some of these books. Okay. They won't say it, but publishers get really excited by the idea that we can get superfans to buy 3 copies of the same book, Sanderson says. Guilty. But wouldn't superfans be happier if they could buy one really nice edition in all formats? Give them a bundle with the print book and the ebook. Reader-centric ideals will lead to long-term success for the publishing industry. Hear, hear. You know what? Absolutely. If he does succeed in shaking up the industry, we'll see. I mean, he may be the biggest out there, but he's still only one author. So we'll see if he can really shake up the industry. But if he does, I would love to see this, where it's $8 for the Kindle edition, it's $15 for the Audible, and it's $25 for the hardcover, or $10 for the paperback or whatever. What if you could get a paperback and spend $18 on it, and you get the Audible and the Kindle edition, or whatever service you use? It doesn't have to be the Amazon ones, but I would love that. I think that's fantastic. That's a great goal. Okay. Let's see. Money spent on books doesn't count. Yeah, unfortunately, my bank doesn't see it that way. Still waiting for Tress. Yeah, hang in there. It'll. Mine only got here last week. They're on their way. So, all right. That's why Sanderson's turned Dragonsteel into an independent press and started publishing his own books. The Kickstarter didn't make us more money than just selling those books in New York would have, he says, because of the overhead costs of fulfillment. But the statement, that's exciting. I start to wonder if he'll stop working with traditional publishers completely, but for now, Sanderson says his ongoing franchises like the Stormlight Archive and Mistborn will continue to be published by Tor Books, while his young adult line will stay with Delacorte Press, Penguin Random House publisher. Let's see, I like my publishers; they do good work. My whole team's well is going to be dry at the end of the year because this Kickstarter is pushing the limits of what we can do. I have some concerns. So he's got 46 employees, and my concern is that he won't have enough for them to do. And I don't know if they've already talked about this. I'm not privy to these conversations. But when the Kickstarter is over, are they going to do another Kickstarter? How, what are they going to do with 46 employees when, half or more of them were brought on to deal with the Kickstarter? It's an interesting question, and one that I'll be keeping an eye on. He does have some future crowdfunding campaigns in mind. Oh, well, okay, there we go. We want to do the Stormlight Leatherbound editions as Kickstarters because we like offering goodies and rewards. And I want to do a Hoyd storybook collection at some point, referring to a fan favorite character who hops between worlds and books in the Cosmere. But not everyone was thrilled by the runaway success of Sanderson's record-breaking Kickstarter in 2022. All right, some juicy stuff. Today is a really good day to support your favorite author who hasn't made $18 million in the last few days, tweeted Natanya Barron, a fantasy novelist based in North Carolina. Am I personally upset at Brandon Sanderson for making money? Not at all. Truly, good for him. If you love fantasy and want to support the genre, I highly recommend reading more and more broadly. She continued, sharing a starter pack of diverse writers in the genre, including N.K. Jemisin, Corafor, and Paul Cabaron's tweet got more than 1,000 likes. Congratulations. Yeah. She said, am I personally upset? Not at all. Truly, good for him. Well, sure didn't sound that way. I remember that tweet. And it felt a little bit like sour grapes. But, I mean, how can you avoid that? It would be tough to watch somebody do roughly the same job that you do and, make that much money. Then it would be difficult, I suppose. Still, Sanderson paid it forward by donating some of his Kickstarter proceeds to almost every other publishing project on the platform last year. So I asked if he was surprised by all the criticism. I wasn't surprised. When you're at the top of your field, you're a lightning rod for criticism, and that's actually healthy. The industry needs that. We don't need people criticizing the person just starting out. Again, here. This is where the criticism should go, he says, pointing to himself. Sanderson is also the first to admit his biggest regret about the Kickstarter is that independent bookstores were left out. While the traditionally published versions of his secret books will still be distributed by Macmillan and brick-and-mortar stores, hundreds of thousands of backers will already have their Dragonsteel editions by the time Macmillan's editions hit shelves. And even among those backers, there's been some dissatisfaction as fulfillment has been slow and uneven. Yeah, I mean, you guys are saying that as well, Hey, can't wait to get my hands on it. I want it. Yeah, it's they definitely have some kinks to work out, right? They need to figure out the process. Let's see. Had the books been traditionally published, a percentage of those backers would have bought copies from bookstores instead. Rebecca George, let's see. I don't know. How much of this do we want to go through? We're not even halfway through, so I think I might kind of skip ahead. So far, you know what, though? Like, this is an actual profile. What I'm liking about this so far is that, like I said, it's not an article about the article writer. That was, if you read a lot of book reviews and movie reviews and whatnot, there is a tendency among some of the chattering class, I suppose, of which I am a part. It must be said. But one of the tendencies that they have when they are talking about, reviewing a book or a movie is they start talking about themselves. Maybe they didn't think the movie was interesting or the book was interesting or whatever. And so, this made me think about the War of 1812. Let me give you 8 paragraphs on the War of 1812. And, right. And back to the book, and that was what that other article did. I went out, spent 2 full days or 3 full days with Brandon and his family and came back and boy, the only thing I can really think to write about is me and my feelings and how I felt about this and that and the other. And it's like, well, so is this a profile of Brandon Sanderson or is he just a delivery system for your ego? And we're not getting that here. So it's longer. I wonder, do I have, nope, not in this browser. I was going to check the word count, but it's gotta be, this has gotta be 5,000 to 7,000 words, right? So yeah, so far so good. Okay, all right. So we're getting into some spicy stuff. Maybe we'll go back into some of this. I think he wants to do 1 a year. Interesting. Okay. He was extremely nice. A few years later, he even emailed me to apologize when his publisher scheduled an event at a different local bookstore. George is disappointed that Sanderson's Kickstarter skipped over bookstores, given their economic challenges in the long shadow of Amazon. It's tough. It makes you wonder if he's forgotten about the people who helped him get here, the booksellers who hand sold his work for years. Yeah, I doubt it. And it is tough. But it's one of those things. The only constant is change, and the way that publishing is happening and the way selling is happening has changed a lot, and it will keep changing. And it's I'm trying to think of another example, but maybe I'll just move on. Okay, so let's see. Some critics of Sanderson's Kickstarter campaign also expressed concerns that backing the project was tantamount to proxy donating to the Mormon Church, whose members are known to tithe, and which, like many religious traditions, has a complicated history with LGBTQ rights, to say the least. Today, a page on the church's official website states, the experience of same-sex attraction is a complex reality for many people. The attraction itself is not a sin, but acting on it is. Back in 2008, wow, okay, so we're going back a little ways. Back in 2008, the Prop 8 stuff. Then the church did a complete 180 by declaring their support for the Respect for Marriage Act in 2022, while still publicly reaffirming our church doctrine, approving only marriage between one man and one woman. Yeah, there's been a lot of movement and shifting that way. So this only barely kind of touches on it, but at least he mentions it, I guess. In addition to practicing his faith, Sanderson serves as a gospel doctrine teacher at a church near his home. By the way, that's just like it's at the actual name of the Sunday school class, gospel doctrine. He also teaches a creative writing course at BYU, which is still sponsored by the Mormon Church. Still, like that makes it sound like, oh, any day now it won't be. Like it will be forever. In an old blog post from 2007, which has since been deleted, Sanderson wrote some stuff that he probably doesn't agree with now. I also accept my church's stance against gay marriage. Yeah, I mean, it was 2007. It was a live debate, and I know he doesn't express those views anymore. So, however, his more recent books feature canonically gay characters, and he seems to have changed his perspective in the years since that deleted post. I'm trying to move quickly, guys. So let's see. So we can read through some of this church's general stance, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. Josh says this section seems fluffy and extra. I don't think so. I think this is important information for somebody who's being introduced. And the idea here, they're not writing this article for us, right? This is Esquire. They're writing it for a general audience who maybe they've heard the name Brandon Sanderson, maybe they haven't, but they don't really know a lot about what's going on with his books and how they're so popular and who he is and all that. And I think this is fair game. Like Brandon says earlier in the article, he is rightly a lightning rod for criticism because he's at the top of the genre. And so, people want to get to know who he is. Well, yeah, I'd say this is fair game. All right. I like this section because it addresses the infamous old post and the changes he's gone through since then. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to lose my voice already. I need some water. Oy. Okay. I always get a lump in my stomach when I see someone who's dredged up that essay, but at the same time, I'm glad I wrote it, since without it, I don't think I'd have had the opportunities to learn what I have. Yeah, there you go. Later, I asked Wilson if Dragonsteel tithes or donates revenue from the Kickstarter or other online sales to the church. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, tithing and other charitable offerings are considered personal religious commitments. Dragonsteel, as a business, does not donate any of its revenue to the church, although individual Dragonsteel employees who are members of the church may choose to contribute from their personal earnings at their discretion. It's such perfect. Who's Wilson? Wilson. Maybe I must have missed something. Maybe somebody at BYU, or I don't know, whatever. But that it's so perfect PR. Okay, of course, tithing isn't a Mormon phenomenon. It's extremely common among many religious faiths. But according to a 2012 Pew survey, 79% of American Mormons tithe 10% of their earnings, a much higher percentage of members than you'll find in similar surveys of other religious groups. Tithing is a principle of my church that I believe in, so is giving to those who need and to causes I believe in. However, Jesus Christ taught us not to speak loudly about our charitable giving. Indeed, he made it very clear that we're to do the opposite. I generally try to follow this by saying that, yes, I do give to my church of my personal funds. I also give to many other causes. The actual numbers and amounts are generally private, as they should be. That's, yes. So, yeah, Sanderson's a religious guy. That's all right. But another Sanderson critic emerged just a few hours before. Oh, here we go. This story was originally scheduled to go live. The senior editor, Jason, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, the senior editor at Wired magazine, who spent even more time in Sanderson's orbit than I did. In his viral profile, Brandon Sanderson is your God, he criticized Sanderson's prose, reputation, clothing, eating habits, state of residence, faith, fans, friends, and family for being, among other adjectives, depressingly, story-killingly lame. Okay, this is fun. I had no idea this was going to come. Okay. Unsurprisingly, a legion of fans came to Sanderson's defense on social media, but some neutral parties were confused by Kehe's oddly hostile language. I've never read Brandon Sanderson, but this profile of him feels outrageously, almost egregiously mean for no reason, wrote Dana Schwartz. Journalist Katie Kelleher came up with a possible explanation. I think the writer of this realized after hours of interviews that he wasn't properly recording. Oh, interesting. Other people enjoyed the profile. Peter Rubin picked the story as one of the top 5 long reads of the week. Later that same day, he shared a lengthy response on Reddit. Over the phone a few days later, Sanderson tells me he felt a lot of different emotions when he sat down to read the story. I felt betrayed. That was the strongest feeling I had after spending so much time talking to him about things he seemed so interested in. But I respect him as a colleague. He's a writer, so he has to write what's true for him, just like you do and just like I do. Sanderson tells me he hasn't heard from Kehe or anyone else at Wired. I wish I knew how to pronounce that name. I really do. Since the profile ran. But I hope I can talk to him again at some point. Anytime I get criticism from anyone, it's my job to listen. Before he hangs up, he compares this experience to something in the Cosmere. One of the main themes of Mistborn is that it's worth trusting people even though they can hurt you. It's better to trust and be betrayed in real life too. That's nice. Yeah, it's yeah, I think that's a nice sentiment. This is one of the reasons that Sanderson is as popular as he is because he's so good at PR. He's so diplomatic, and it's not like that's a chore for him. He really is that guy. He's a very generously hearted man, and so yeah, that really it rings true. That is definitely who he is. Over email, I ask a few questions as well. Why did he read so many of Sanderson's books if he didn't like the writing? Thank you. Was he surprised by the responses to his story? Did the responses change his perspective on anything? He writes back, as I've said to others, the piece belongs to readers now. They get the last word. Oh my... Oh my gosh. So, you done messed up, Aaron. And he gets called out after making the piece mostly about himself, in some ways. Now suddenly he doesn't have anything to say about it. What a, oh gosh. I hope this guy never, not this guy, I hope this guy doesn't write for any large magazines again, because yikes, man, yikes. Okay, well, let's see. I've interviewed staff members who are desperate to show off their company culture. Sometimes their smiles look a little painful. Every few minutes, they check their phones for urgent emails and Slack messages. Dragonsteel doesn't feel like that. Employees here are comfortable with one another, genuinely laughing at frequent jokes. Driven and passionate, the Cosmere is a playground for their imaginations. Several people I met were writing or publishing their own novels inspired by the world building they do every day at work, and one of the warehouse employees, Mem Grange, has made a side career out of crochet patterns for Cosmere fauna. Yeah, that is pretty fun. I remember something Sanderson said underground. All I can say is I want to do cool things that make the industry better for everybody, and I'm trying my best to do them in a morally upright way while treating people well. Yeah, there you go. And it's, and he's trying to do it, things that will make the industry better for everybody, but, like the independent bookseller said, hey, not all these things are working out for all of us, and that's fair. But you can't be perfect or do everything perfectly or whatever. You can't please everybody. Let's see. Call it the Cosmere House. So touring the other homes. So he has 3 properties next door to each other: the Lair, his house, and then Cosmere House, which is the office. Each room is themed. We meet the barefoot Peter Alstrom. Yep, there's Peter. Oh yeah, we love Peter. I was Brandon's first full-time employee. He just needed an extra brain. Now he's the in-house copy editor and proofreader for the hundreds of thousands of words Sanderson cranks out every year. And he is diligent. Branderson? Wow. Brandon doesn't like doing the later stages of editing, but I love it. And my wife Karen is the continuity director, so she keeps an internal wiki with hundreds of characters and locations. Some of those characters are thinly disguised cameos from Sanderson's staff, including Pete and Ka in the Stormlight Archive, the Alstrom's alter egos. We meet Dan Wells. Upstairs, yeah, it's just more of a tour. This is what we're actually looking for. His schedule, which we kind of got in the Wired article a little bit, plays Elden Ring. In some ways, okay, here, this is interesting, potentially. Sanderson thinks the video game industry is light years ahead of book publishing. They let you self-select your price point by getting these really cool items, he says. Elden Ring, for instance, retailed for around $60, but consumers could spend a little more for a deluxe edition with a digital art book and a digital soundtrack, or 4 times as much for a collector's edition with a 9-inch statue of Melania. That's when I realized that the Cosmere House, more than anything else, feels like a mid-size indie game studio. Sanderson's vision of his fictional universe, the level of detail he wants in order for it to feel real, is just too big for one person. So, like a video game developer or a filmmaker in charge of a massive franchise, he's hired artists and writers and production experts to help bring his worlds to life. And the most remarkable thing is he's just getting started. I don't know if I'd put it that way, but yeah, he's got a ways to go. We'd love to build a bookstore, a real office. Can't keep having everyone work at the warehouse and here, gesturing to the Cosmere House. He's found a new warehouse a short drive away from the current one, 10 times the size of the warehouse we have now. That's a lot. I'll be interested to see that if I ever get to. Okay, well, all right, let's see what else you guys have to say. Oh. I feel like that quote encapsulates Brandon pretty well. I read an article that proposed Steven Erikson was a better choice of author for the Elden Ring content than Sanderson. Is Sanderson writing Elden Ring content? I haven't been keeping up with that, if that's the case. I don't play Elden Ring, so I don't know anything about that stuff. All right. Where are we at? We'll see if our philosophy holds out. The idea is you invest in your people, the company will be successful, rather than investing in your company first. Yeah, I mean, in a way, you have to take care of your people. We'll see. We'll see. But it's one of those things. It's like a balance. If you're the owner of a company, you have to find that balance of investing in the business versus the people in it. Because if you don't invest in the business and it crashes, then none of these people have jobs anymore. So it's tough. Let's see. Emily, his wife, quickly became his business manager, helping with fan mail, doing all the paperwork. Now she acts as COO for a one-of-a-kind business. Part independent press, merchandise manufacturer, streaming content producer, editorial, and artistic support system for the Cosmere. Brandon's the big vision person, and I'm the detail person. I probably wouldn't dare do some of this on my own. And I'm a little overambitious, yeah. Gift for understatement? I never knew you had it in you, Brandon. That's funny. The fifth. Oh my gosh! I not seen this. Oh, maybe I heard some rumblings about this. The fifth Stormlight Archive novel, tentatively titled Knights of Wind and Truth. Interesting. Interesting. So we're not counting articles or conjunctions in these titles then. So the Way of Kings becomes Knights of Wind and Truth. Okay. Interesting. All right. Oh, didn't know that, but they went with Martin. Oh, okay, with Elden Ring. Huh. Sanderson did Moonbreaker. Oh, okay. Cool. All right. In the real world, the gap between books will be double what it usually... Oh, okay. Whoa. It's the halfway point of the series, so the stakes are high. In world, it'll be a 10 to 15 year gap between the end of book 5 and the beginning of book 6. In the real world, the gap between books will be double what it usually is, so 6 years instead of 3. Wow. Okay. So we get this one next year, next November, and then 6 years after that, so 2030. We're not going to get Stormlight 6 until 2030, which I'm fine with, honestly, as long as we get a decent ending in book 5, because I want to see Mistborn Era 3. I want to see Dragonsteel stuff. I want to see more Hoyd. There's a lot of stuff that I want to see. So I'm cool with 6 years of waiting, especially if he holds to that. And he does a really good job. So if he says 6 years, you'll get it in 6 years, there's a very, very good chance we actually will. Rather than, I think I'm going to sit down and write that book. And, 5 years later, we're all like, so where's that book? So during that gap, here we go. He wants to write a third trilogy set in the Mistborn universe. Before he retires at 70, he plans to write 5 more Stormlight Archive volumes, a 4th Mistborn trilogy, 2 sequels to Elantris, yes, and a trilogy called Dragonsteel about the origins of the Cosmere. He has ideas for more books, too. I know exactly how the Stormlight Archive ends, he says. I've been very sneaky with some of the foreshadowing in ways I can't tell you about because then people will figure it out. And they will. I am not the kind of person who would be able to do it, but some of you can. I can almost guarantee it. People will figure it out. The end of the Cosmere is a little more vague, but I know what I want to do. Interesting. Fans have theorized that elements of the Cosmere were directly inspired by Sanderson's faith. For example, the three main planets in the Stormlight Archive share some similarities with the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial kingdoms in Mormon cosmology. I wonder if he's going to get into that. Those are like the levels of heaven. So the idea in Mormon theology being that almost everybody goes to heaven. Very, very few people will actually go to hell. But the question is like how heavenly your heaven will be. So that's interesting. I think the interpretations that fans make are most likely valid, but I don't do it consciously, he says. Tolkien abhorred allegory, which, again, I've mentioned it before, but I have my disputes with Tolkien on his own statement that he dislikes allegory. And C.S. Lewis really leaned into it. I'm totally fine with allegory, but I'm more like Tolkien. I don't write books to teach lessons. I write books to be uplifting in people's lives. Okay. I'm, and kind of like I dispute Tolkien's assertion, I might dispute this lightly. I don't think that's his primary objective per se. But he does too much lesson teaching in his books to say that that's not why he writes them. It just feels a little too much like a blanket statement. I'm not sure. Anyway. Before I lose Sanderson to a podcast recording session, I ask whether he thinks Dragonsteel will change the book publishing industry for the better. If I can get some other authors on board to push for some of the same things, yes. My biggest worry is that I'm just one person. That much is true. Sanderson is just one person, and so far, major publishers don't seem interested in changing their sales and production models. But sitting in the basement of the Cosmere house, surrounded by hundreds of books, original paintings, replica swords, and the largest team a novelist has hired since Johannes Gutenberg put a bunch of metal letters on a block of wood in the 15th century, I can't help but wonder if Dragonsteel's unprecedented success might turn a few influential heads in New York when it comes to price point flexibility or ebook and merchandise bundling. One of the last things Sanderson says is, I want this to be the best place to work that a person could have. And I remember one of the warehouse employees I met earlier, Kaylee Arnold, a fulfillment clerk who joined the team last year during the Kickstarter boom. This is one of the best places I've ever worked, she said with a genuine smile. I think she meant it. Okay. All right. So we actually made it through the whole thing. It only took me 49 minutes. And yeah, I guess, did this article succeed where the other one failed? Yes, in a few ways. It actually introduces people who don't know who he is to Brandon Sanderson and his work. It sticks to its thesis. You know, obviously there are detours, but he always comes back to the thesis, which is, you know, he's going to change the way, let's see, a popular writer determined to upend how books get made, restore power to the reader. And so, you know, yes, he takes detours from that, but he always comes back to that. Is this a more boring piece than the other one, especially if you already know about Cosmere, especially, you know, if you've been to Dragonsteel and you're familiar with who Brandon is it more boring than the other one? Yeah, because he's not, you know, making fun of him. I got to find that paragraph again. That paragraph about the Wired piece was incredible. But it's only boring if you already know all this stuff. If you don't know this stuff, you would probably read this, you know, kind of tour of the lair and the Cosmere house and whatnot. You'd probably read all that stuff and just like your mind is blown. Like, wow, this guy has a saltwater fish tank in his basement. You know, in the basement of his lair, 30 feet underground. Like, that's amazing. So yeah, it's not as well. I keep coming back to the word punchy, but we're not looking for punchy. We're looking for informative and interesting, and it is those things. So I've got to find. Maybe I can just Control F this. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll just. There it is. It's so good. He criticized Sanderson's prose, reputation, clothing, eating habits, state of residence, faith, fans, friends, and family for being, among other adjectives, depressingly, story-killingly lame. And, you know, the other thing that he left out of that is that he criticized Brandon himself. He's talking about a lot of these things, but the guy in Wired makes a lot of fun of Brandon himself, and I'm glad that this guy addressed that. So let's see. It was solid. Yeah, I mean, I know all this stuff, and I still found it really interesting. Yeah. There you go. It was good. I find myself with less to say, which is both good and bad, right? It's you come away from it more informed, but less agitated. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say this is a very successful article in that way, because don't we have quite enough of the other already online? We have enough stuff that agitates us without actually informing us. So it's nice when you have a profile like this that informs you without making you, you know, angry or laughing hysterically, you know, if you don't like Brandon or whatever. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a more successful and more well-written article. Oh, it's definitely better written. The other one was actually shockingly poorly written. Once I went back a third time and read through it again with an eye toward the actual writing, and it's bad. For somebody who attacks Brandon's prose, it was very poorly written. Anyway, so yeah, this one, yeah, much more solid, as you say. So there you go. Well, I'm feeling a little better now about Brandon's place in the public eye. I guess. What a picture! It's so awkward. What a picture. Okay, let's see. What I appreciated most, says Linnea, was that this article discussed some criticisms, so it's not simply flat praise. Yeah, and honestly, there wasn't even a ton of praise in there. It kind of addresses the praise and the criticism in both ways by, you know, by not making it about the article or the article writer, making it about kind of the reaction to Brandon and what this person was actually able to find, whether it's online sources or the bookstore owners that he talked to or whatever. Um, actual reporting. How dare you? Um, but does that make sense? Like it's he didn't go out of his way to say, oh, and by the way, these books are amazing or these books are terrible. But he did bring in some people who said, yeah, I've got some problems with um, the way the publishing is handled, or hey, there's this thing that people talk about when it comes to his Mormon faith or whatever. So he brings that up, but he's not telling you what to think about that. He's just bringing up the praise and the criticism and letting you decide, where you fall on that stuff. Um, the Tolkien quote that Brandon is talking about with allegory goes on. People don't, most people don't know the rest of that quote. He says, I cordially dislike allegory and have done so ever since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, for its applicability to the reader. So basically, he goes on to say that whereas allegory history is about applicability to the reader, and allegory is about the proposed domination of the author. This article fits in really well with that. We don't have, this isn't an Esquire writer who is determined to give us his take and make us think about the criticisms or the praise of Brandon in the way that he wants us to. He is laying out the case and saying, okay, put the puzzle pieces together how you think they fit. Yeah. So let's see. Kind of ignored the books, which is good for this article. Interesting. Yeah, it kind of did. I think it would be interesting to get into. He mentioned the Kickstarter numbers, it's like 183,000 backers for that. So that's already an interesting number. But, how many books did Brandon sell total in 2021 or 2022 or whatever? Like those would have been interesting numbers. So there are things that I could have directed the writer toward and said, hey, we'd love to get this information. Some of that is notoriously difficult to get. But he didn't get into the actual content of the books, which, yeah, I guess is fine. Yeah, it's fine. It was just a nice article about who Brandon is. Exactly. And with that being said, this is just a nice little live stream where I read thousands upon thousands of words about Brandon Sanderson, and we're going to start wrapping it up. I do want to see if I can pull up one of my, I guess not that one. One of my browsers has a word counter plugin, and so I'll get another. You know what? No, I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to get a word counter plugin. We're going to find out how many words this article is because I'm genuinely really interested. Extensions, manage extensions. Okay, we want word counter. Yep. Oh yeah, it's in there. I did have it. Okay, word counter plus. There we go. Oh, come on. How come it's not working? Oh, okay. So I have to highlight the whole freaking thing. Okay. Sorry, guys. This is going to take a second. All right. But we're going to find, because I want to know how many words this was that we just went through. There'll be a few extras, when it comes to the image captions, but this is 5,287 words. So, if it's a word per foot, it would go a mile and then some. So there you go. Yeah, call it 5,000 words. We did 5,000 words today, you guys. So thanks for joining. Next week, be here next week because I'm going to unveil a very small crowdfunding project As some of you know, the computer that I'm working on right now is pretty old. I've had it for years and years now, and it's getting to the point now where, as I'm editing some of our episodes and other work that I need to do, but it happens a lot with Legendarium episodes, it just craps out. The thing gives out. It's struggling to to keep up with the state of software today. So I'm really I'm going to have you guys help out with getting a new editing bay for the Legendarium. But the way we're going to do that is similar to what we did when we built the studio, which was voting on what books you think we should read next. And we're going to go straight oligarchy on this one. This is not democracy, because $1 donated equals one vote for what we read next. And so I think I have like 5 options, and we'll take the top 2 or 3 vote getters and read those next on the show. So I'll be unveiling that next week in the live stream, and we'll talk about how that will all work. But anyway, it should be pretty exciting. We also, Little Red Book and I have some announcements that will be forthcoming about next year's I don't want to call it Legendarium Con, because it'll be a lot smaller than something like Dragonsteel, but our meetup that we're going to be doing next February. So we'll have some announcements about that, and so stay tuned. I'll be back next week at the same time, 15 minutes earlier. We'll start at 8:30 Eastern next Thursday, and I will look forward to talking to you all then. Thanks again, and have a great weekend when it gets here tomorrow.